Some time ago, I stumbled upon this internet post that would set an opposition between sandboxes and railroading. The argument was basically that either you were running a sandbox game or you would be railroading your players. That gave me shivers. The following day, I would run an adventure that looked nothing like a sandbox. Was I then about to railroad my players? That question was what triggered me to find the 3 things I had to keep in mind to make sure my players had the power to affect how an adventure unfolds. 1. Beware of my adventure environments, such as dungeons and towns, and how they impact freedom of choice. 2. Consider the encounter nodes of my adventures. And 3. Deliver clear encounter triggers in my adventures. So I was about to run this level 1 adventure. There were bandits known as the Sneaky Rats who were robbing merchant caravans and plundering the farms in the surroundings of Arabelle. The Purple Dragons, the local militia, were understaffed, so they called a party to tackle the issue. They were supposed to travel undercover as a merchant caravan to bait the Sneaky Rats. Of course, the plot would thicken, but it was a pretty straightforward adventure with mostly linear encounters, and players would either find and overturn the Sneaky Rats or not. They would have an initial encounter with part of the band, which would lead to a couple of other encounters until they found an informant with the location of the latest bandits' hideout, and then they would confront them. As I said, that looks nothing like a sandbox. You've probably heard about railroading. It's the original scene of role-playing games. But this post I read made it even worse. It said DMs who would railroad their players were deep down frustrated writers who, in the absence of an audience, would hijack their group, who would have nowhere to run but endure hours and sessions long of you telling them your stupid story. Okay, I might be a bit overdramatic in my retelling, but that was how it sounded to me. And ouch, that hurt. But let's break it down. Of course, we DMs are storytellers. Otherwise, why would we undergo the hours of creating worlds and adventures and planning encounters to have sessions cancelled at the last minute and still keep doing it? But that doesn't mean that we're frustrated writers, and our impulse to tell stories are certainly not out of selfishness. Instead, it's driven by an outbursting generosity. Nothing makes a DM happier than seeing their group having fun. Our fun is to provide fun to others, so never ever listen to this kind of rubbish. I know why I'm doing it, and you know why you're doing it. We love to bring people together and provide them with fun and relief from an everyday life that can often be quite tough. The point is, being a DM is not only one of the most fun and exciting things to do, but it can also feel very much challenging. Why? Because it demands you to hone over time a set of very much different skills, from world building to storytelling to game designing to role-playing to understanding your group preferences to reading the room, to concerting pace and mood of a session. It's a crazy assortment of soft and hard skills, creativity and logic, and intuition and reasoning. As they are such different skills, it also means you will probably be much better in some of them than in others. And that's okay, that's more than okay. Gosh, players can see quite well how hard it is, and they are most appreciative that you are willing to take that risk and put your skin in the game. And there's so much into it that you can almost perceive your evolution on a weekly basis. And few feelings are as much satisfying as perceiving your own development in anything in life every week. That's how it is to me, and I bet that's how it is for you too. When I go back to my initial years, yes, years, I summarize them like this. At first, I had no idea about what I was doing, but as I didn't realize that, I was just fine. After DMing for some time, I started to fear I was doing it wrong. Then, when I was finally more on top of what I was doing, I began to feel guilty when I got it wrong. Silly me, I didn't realize those are simply the feelings you have when you are out of your comfort zone, better known as learning. So don't be like me and beat yourself down. Understand it's a long and fun journey in which the path is much more interesting than the destination. Be grateful every time you get something wrong. That's simply you understanding something doesn't work and getting better prepared to make it right. That's learning. It's actually satisfying when you look at it that way. What about my adventure? Was I railroading my players or not? I don't think so. I think the opposition between sandboxes and railroading is misleading for several reasons. For one, I don't think they're two different edges of the same spectrum. Of course, not railroading your players is essential, but the actual opposite of that is player agency. And player agency provides your players with choices, their associated risks of succeeding and failing, and their consequences. So for me, it's possible even for a linear adventure to provide player agency as long as players have available choices of how to approach an encounter, a fair and balanced challenge for their choice, the chance of succeeding or failing, and their profiting or suffering the consequences of their decisions. Second, suppose linear stories were synonyms of railroading and sandbox their opposite. In that case, that could lead us to believe that the simple fact of creating a sandbox adventure would provide player agency. That's also not true. A sandbox adventure may give players the choice of what encounter to face first. Still, if they can choose how to tackle the encounters, and if the encounter doesn't allow different outcomes and consequences, you could still be using a sandbox to railroad your players. And lastly, it could lead us also to think that a sandbox adventure could only be an anthology of unconnected or loosely connected quests, and that a larger connected story could not be designed as a sandbox adventure. That could be true if I were to take the strictest definition of the term, but then I would be throwing away an outstanding tool that could be used to tell a great story where everything is connected and that at the same time provides players with a great degree of freedom to navigate through it. And I'd rather not. My adventures clearly favor storytelling and role-playing above exploration and combat, but I see great value in having sandboxes in my tool set to design them. So it became clear to me that player agency was the opposing end of railroading and that I should keep railroading in check. Then I started to think about the characteristics of a sandbox. 1, it's an open world. 2, it has a high degree of freedom to choose where to go and what to do. And 3, at its extreme, few or no active triggers directing players on what to do next. The point is, even if I tighten one or more of those 3 layers, some people would still call it a sandbox and some wouldn't. That's why to me it is more helpful to think of each of those layers separately. The first layer is how open the game world or the adventure environment is. Typically, we're talking about wilderness, settlements, and dungeons. At first look, wilderness is a more open world than settlements with their neighborhoods, streets, and houses, which in turn are more open than dungeons with their walls and corridors and doors. But the fun is tweaking then. Add roads, trails, gorges, and cliffs to the wilderness, or add secret passages, rivers, tunnels, and bridges connecting many of the rooms of a dungeon, and the concept of an open or closed world for them starts to change dramatically. The second layer is encounter nodes, which dictates the freedom players have to choose how to navigate their adventure. If an encounter is the individual unit of an adventure, the way that each encounter is connected is its node. An adventure could be linear, branched, or non-linear. But you know what's even better for me? An adventure wisely designed using the most appropriate encounter nodes for whatever your aim is to reach. I call the last layer encounter triggers. They are basically what propels players from one encounter to the following one. A trigger may be information, clues, or a compelling description that attracts players. There are several means through which encounter triggers could manifest. An NPC, an event, an object, a location, or even in-game time. When designing my adventures, I consider what combination of adventure environments, encounter nodes, and encounter triggers I can use to enhance the power of my players to control how the adventure develops. And I always keep in mind that it's not only about giving them the power of choice, but also allowing them to make informed decisions, to face actual challenges that may go well or not, and to collect the benefits and hindrances of its outcomes.